Good morning, everyone brave enough to join at 5:30 a.m. It's Thursday. I'll be on the road shortly and gone most of the day. It was either now or after 7 o'clock tonight, closer to 7:30. And I plan on watching the Game 6 of the NBA Finals around that. So we're going on early. But thank you if you're here with me early again for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It's Kevin McPherson, and there's a few little pieces of new information. I call it intel regarding some things related to Arkansas men's basketball, especially when we're still eyeballing the roster for the upcoming season. This is kind of, to me now, going to split one of two ways in terms of what may be done to add to the roster, or just kind of leaving things like they are. We've talked a lot about it. The last time I really spoke on this at any length was right after speaking with a staff member the day after Arkansas announced two new additions to what I consider back-end pieces to the roster, and Elmir Drafic, as well as Paulo Samito. Those were two names, big men, 7-footer guys that were added late last week. And so the next conversation with the staff was just about trying to, shore up what did this mean. And so, we kind of left with the idea, and the last thing I said on it was it looks like a true 8-man, 2-deep rotation with more back-end pieces that are higher rated guys that can maybe help in a pinch or emergency, but maybe there's a bigger role as the ninth man for someone in this group of players. Isaiah Sealy, Samito are the two. I kind of had 9 and 10 with guys like Javic and Kareem Artal maybe next up. And then you have your guys that are effectively your, practice bodies, locker room, vibes, get yourself to a full roster if you can types like Jaden Caroletwa and Amir Brown. So that's where we kind of left it. And, the fact that the staff at the time, when I spoke with them, said there were maybes in terms of maybe add a 15th guy that we haven't heard about yet, in terms of it's about to become a commitment, and it has to be the right fit, make sense, that kind of thing. What we've heard all along. So there was debate. Well, was that the end of the roster? Those last two additions, was that it, and they're wrapped up? But they've still got another spot to add. Well, one of the interesting things that we've noticed in photos that have come out from Calipari's camps, in the most recent practice photo, we've only seen two from Calipari. And I say practice. One was, they had players on the court. I'm assuming the first one couple of weeks ago when everybody arrived, and it was maybe they played some pickup ball, and he had a photo op, which you saw all the players with the exception of Carter Knox. In this most recent photo, Knox is also not in the photo, and this came out a couple of days ago, and we mentioned it on one of these segments after that. Not to worry, he's had a little 2 or 3 day respite. Good morning to you as well, and that everything was fine there. He's coming back. Okay, no big deal there. But in this photo, you saw more staff members at one end, and you saw Aiden Kelly, who was a walk-on last year's team, but he was in street clothes, and he was not in with the main group of players. They were all together, the ones that were in the photo, minus Carter Knox, and you still don't have the two recent additions that committed last week. They haven't arrived yet. But you saw Aiden Kelly on the end, on one side of Chuck Martin, in a cluster of coaches or others with the program that don't play. And all the players that were in the photo were wearing practice gear, and Aiden Kelly was in street clothes. Okay, so I had to ask about this. So another conversation with a staff member, and I'm not going to go into exactly what they told me. I'm going to give you my takeaway. So this is not quoting what the staff member said, and it's not even paraphrasing what they said. It's cobbling together some of the information I got, and this is what I'm coming out of it with. This is my takeaway. So this is the first little piece of intel based on that conversation. I see Aiden Kelly as a plan B for this roster. He could be the 15th man. If you remember when we were talking about what Arkansas's options were, if they are going to fill it, they filled it last year. They had 15 deep. We know it was a top 9 rotation, then 6 other players. One of those was Lawson Blake, who returned from the previous regime, was injured, didn't play all year, but he was still on the roster all the way through the season and never played. But what you will notice is that Aiden Kelly still does not appear on Arkansas's published roster on the website, arkansasrazorbacks.com. They recently updated that roster. And you see 12 names, including Amir Brown, who was a walk-on that was just recently added and moved onto campus in late May at the same time that his buddy Malik Thomas, the 5-star guard, that obviously he's on Arkansas's roster as well and part of the team. If you go all the way back to the retention video during portal season, Carol Letwa was included. We didn't know about Amir Brown yet. Maybe that was something that was solidified later, but there was no photo or no Aiden Kelly. And you hadn't seen him until recently. We start looking at some of this one team photo, but with the coaching group part of it, and then several of Calipari's camp photos that he released. You could see him with the other players in the background. I guess as camp counselors or whatever they call them, assisting with the camp. That's always a thing. So I'm convinced that Aiden Kelly is a plan B. So this is a guy that could be your 15th man, but I think it's very specific. The way that I'm now interpreting this based on this conversation, why he's not listed on the roster yet, and why he's in street clothes when we see him, and why he was it seemed very strategic to me in that photo that he was not in with the players, that he was in with the little cluster of some of the coaches and staff members. And so if he's a plan B, it means that they're going to get to 15. I think Aiden is a student assistant. Well, based on this conversation, it wasn't quite framed that way. Again, I'm not going to go into the specifics of exactly how it was worded to me. This is my takeaway. This is my speculation that I feel like is probably where this is headed. So you're either going to fill up with an Aiden Kelly being your 15th player as a walk-on and a practice body, but by leaving the door open here, which is what it looks like, we still are where we were a few days ago on the conversation with the staff member prior to the one I just had, where they're not in a hurry. This is not they're not in an emergency to add someone. They're not lacking a piece to round out what they want their top rotation to be. They've got 8 that they're happy with. One more depth piece at the 4 spot makes the most sense. We've gone through a lot of the names. Some kind of maybe shooter, even if that's another guard or wing perimeter player with experience, older player internationally, someone that's a high-level talent, maybe reclassing from 2026. So we know what the names are. Igor Rizov, the Russian 6'11" forward center, that may have some issues, and it will take time, if he ever gets there, to get it ironed out, to get a visa to come over. Arkansas, the staff confirmed with the other 2 late additions last week that Rizov was in the mix with those 2, Arkansas pursuing to add to the roster. No commitment announcement, because there may be a long way off from figuring out how that's going to work and if they can get him here. Another name we mentioned, that's an international player, Ece Demir out of Turkey, talked about him a few episodes ago, and he's the one that's got a lot of high majors pursuing him, originally committed to UCLA back in 2022. We talked about him. It's just another name that's out there, and we'll see where things go with some of these players. We've talked so much about Terrion Burgess, who's still nothing public on that, and it seems like the longest of long shots that could land, the 6'9" combo forward out of Benton, class of 2025, and who knows what the decision will be for him. We've gone through all of that, but even the staff said, even though we haven't talked about that in a while, when that was a real possibility to add, and there was a place for him over a month ago, hasn't been talked about in a while, but the wording was crazier things have happened. That was no indication that that's probably going to happen or likely to. It was just, I think they're leaving the door open to possibilities. And so there's all kinds of places we can move all over this map. But leaving open a spot, whether you get it resolved later in the summer in time for the start of school, and really when practice really ramps up in the fall leading into the season, or if it goes even later than that, which is hard to imagine. But remember, Calipari at Kentucky added Big Z's, Vladimir Visic, in August. He added him in August, and then it took a long time for Z to get cleared, and he ended up playing only 15 games. He was finally cleared in the middle of the season and played 15 games as a freshman at Kentucky. So Calipari's added other players by other means, not just international, but transfers after, a coach was fired, something no one saw coming. An incident happened, ends up getting Trey Mitchell. But there's all kinds of examples of Calipari hanging out, waiting, and having a roster spot open. So we talked about this is probably maybe what, based on what the staff was saying they're doing. And now that Aiden Kelly is front and center, he's featured and pictured along with the team in so many photos. Now the plan becomes a little more clear to me in terms of how I see it, not specifically worded this way to me, but again, the intel is enough from that conversation where I feel like Aiden Kelly again's a plan B. He's there to be that guy, and unless they get something, and to me, he'd already be that guy if that's the direction that they were determined to go, and he was plan A just to round out the roster. That's why I see it as a plan B. At the moment that we see Aiden Kelly's name added to the roster, this is a done deal, and it means that other options that maybe they're leaving the door open for, they've made the determination, we'll just move on, or they get some finality on some guys and think, well, we're not going to wait any longer. Let's move on. That kind of a thing. I know it's clear as mud, but this staff moves in darkness. I mean, the two names that were added last week weren't on the radar. Some of the ones I went through have been on the radar for a while, and the fact that the staff acknowledges at least one of those, Rezov, and in the past, again, a 2026 reclass, those things can develop, a little later with some. The talking point with Mika Muurinen, that's where the next part of the intel comes in. Class of 2026 has been a strong candidate for a reclass. We've been talking about that for nearly a year. It's been kind of back and forth, on and off. And lately there's been more smoke that, it seems more likely that he will. And then you had one national reporter that spoke with his agent. The agent said, well, he's class of 2026, and that's the plan. I came on to explain why an agent would say something like that to a reporter, because you're not going to confirm something until it's time to. Because why would you? If you decide to stay, you didn't open up that can of worms. You just left it where his natural class is. So we talked about that. And then I mentioned on a recent segment here that I had a source saying, also keep an eye on Mika Muurinen reclassing, but doing it at midterm. He may need to wait and to do enough work academically for that to be something that he could do, but he would do it then. Well, I've got a second source now that's telling me the same thing in terms of just keep an eye on it happening maybe a little bit later, maybe mid-season with Muurinen. So that's the intel in combination with, after getting that information and speaking with one of the national reporters, learned yesterday that Muurinen has spoken of and plans to take a visit to Kentucky. Now, he was back and forth on a Kentucky visit. He plans to, back in the fall last year when Arkansas got a visit, as did Utah and Michigan. What's interesting about that is that he's talking about taking a visit to Kentucky in the fall. So if he's taking a visit in the fall, you're thinking, okay, well, that means school's already started, and he was either remaining class of 2026 if he does that, or it kind of lends to the idea that maybe he'll do something at midterm if he's going to go ahead and reclass. Maybe it is that would be the timeline. So I'm syncing up and trying to read between the lines based on the new intel with a second source saying maybe look at the midterm time with a reclass for him, and what he told a national recruiting analyst that ended up being published later yesterday after I learned of that and put out a tweet. I got new intel on Muurinen. Later came out and published an article on one of Kentucky's beat writers, did an article, Jacob Polachek, regarding a visit upcoming maybe for Kentucky in the fall. So, and also talking with that recruiting analyst, if Muurinen wanted to better position himself for NIL, and maybe make a deal that's better for him, it might be something at midterm because it'll be a unique situation. And by then, teams will have a better idea of what they're lacking on their team, on their squads, because they've already played a number of non-conference games. All kinds of things can begin to come clear about, players that teams might want to move on from, or planning, go ahead and getting a jump early relative to what other teams will be doing in the spring at that point, because your early period's already come and gone if you do a midterm, something like that. So it might be as much strategic if you wait until midterm than just a requirement or a necessity based on academics and being able to qualify to go to college. So there's some uncertainty about that part of it, only to say that it falls into line and makes sense. I'm not saying that's a smoking gun. It means that's why Arkansas would hold a spot open, but it's one example of why they might be willing to hold it open, not only to see what they can do through the summer, at which point they may just say, okay, we're not keeping it open to see what happens midterm. We're going to go ahead and let Aiden Kelly go plan B and let him be that 15th guy. Or they can drag it out, stretch it out, and keep their options open into the into the semester break around the holidays. When you're going from fall semester, you have the holiday break, obviously, and then you move into your spring semester, and that's for basketball. That's when you're wrapping up non-conference play, going into SEC play. And Muurinen's only one. He may be the main example right now for a reclass, but there are others considering it. There's a lot of high-level five-star guys Arkansas's after, in addition to the one commitment they have for that class in J.J. Andrews. So I think all of these things, all these names we've said, kind of talked about some of this the last time I really went into it on Saturday, but just these updated pieces of information are maybe a little bit informing in terms of what that looks like. And I think now, again, just to kind of recap the roster part, I think we're seeing Aiden Kelly, and they're going to have plausible deniability either way. If they end up not adding anyone and he's the roster guy, they're like, well, we put him in the photos. You knew he was here. And if they add somebody else, it was like, well, if you were paying attention, not that they're going to speak publicly on it, but if you're paying attention, Aiden Kelly has not been on the roster. This is not some guy that just walked up. Again, remember, he was on the 15-man roster last year as a freshman, walk-on. So the fact that he's noticeably not on there, but you're seeing him in photos, that's not a mistake. I don't think that's an accident. Again, I think it's what I just said. All right, 17 and a half minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. That's my vantage point as we continue to move along and try to construct. While they're constructing a roster, we're trying to construct, what does this mean? What does that mean? Who's still out there? Because I'm telling you, if they're leaving that spot open for any period of time, it means I don't know how active they are in pursuing, but we know, again, that Rezoff was somebody they were actively pursuing, and it's not to a point where there's a commitment there. And maybe something else comes into the picture. Again, I've thrown out some ways this could go. Another international player. Maybe one we've seen the name but haven't thought about it related to Arkansas. And we're assuming probably someone that can help depth on the front line and maybe back up Brazil at the 4, but maybe it's a shooter. Maybe it's a forward that can shoot. Maybe it's a backcourt, but who knows? Let's just keep our eyes on it. Again, the marker is going to be Aiden Kelly being officially added to the roster. And the other thing is, at some point when the other two players who just committed arrive, they'll be added to the roster too. They're not on there yet. It's still sitting at 12 names. But this roster was not updated either to the 12 names we see now until move-in had happened. It was after we even learned of Amir Brown as kind of the 12th guy and reported that was already out there. And then we talked about it. And then a couple of days later is when they updated the 2025-26 roster, and you saw the 12 names, including Amir Brown, the walk-on. So I think it'll be one of those things where we'll see their names appear on the roster maybe when all the stuff's kind of formalized, and maybe when they arrive is when we see those names. But remember, Aiden Kelly's arrived. Again, he's different. He was on the team last year. He's been on campus. We see him in photos. Name's still not on the roster. All right, we really are switching gears here, 19 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. 247 Sports updated its class of 2026 prospect rankings. In fact, they had recently moved J.J. Andrews up, I don't know, a bunch, up to like 17th, maybe 25, 30 spots up from where they had him. And then we've seen what he's done in the spring. He's been a wrecking ball on the Nike EYBL circuit, NBPA Top 100 camp a few days ago. Hell, at the team camp here, playing with his high school teammate, Little Rock Christian Academy, the last couple of days here in the 501, and got a chance to go out and see him put on a show and interview him. But the updated rankings, and JJ has now moved up a few more spots to 13th. And lo and behold, 247 Sports, plenty of players in their top 12 that Arkansas is recruiting, but they only go 12 deep on their 5-star ratings. So all the way up to number 13, JJ Andrews is still not a 5-star. According to 247 Sports, he's the first 4-star. The best of the 4 stars, not a 5-star, according to 247 Sports. I refuse to refer to JJ Andrews anything but a 5-star. I made the same move when the same stuff happened to Moses Moody, and here we are again, and this is what I'm staying with. He is a 5-star. 247 Sports says, not yet. Not the way we've got it. And interestingly enough, at 13 is JJ Andrews. 14 is Mika Muurinen, who we just talked about. We're still watching and keeping a close eye on his reclass possibilities, and how that might work with Arkansas. And then at number 15 was Arafan Diane, the 7'1", 285-pound center, who's just racking up the high major offers. He recently reported the offer for Arkansas on his Twitter account that he's had since last July. Calipari's been out to see him. We've talked a lot about him. I've been out to see him play. The staff's been out to see him play. But he's the number 1 center according to 247 Sports. We've said that already. He was ranked between 20th and 25th. He's now moved up to 15th. So you've got JJ Andrews, Mika Muurinen, and Arafan Diane, one of Arkansas's priority recruiting targets in that class 2026. All of them 4 stars as it stands now, and just outside, again, 5-star status. We know that Tyron Stokes, Jordan Mitchell Jr., I think they go 1 and 2. Stokes 1, Jordan Mitchell the Jr., I think they're 1-2 in those rankings. I believe I'm right about that. And when I recently did my top 5 players at Arkansas, when they kind of cast a wide enough net to be after prioritizing 12 to 15 of these 2026 guys, knowing at the end of the day they're trying to boil it down to 3 or 4 that they're actually going to add. Now JJ, subtract him off that number because they've already got that commitment, so 2 or 3 more. I did a top 5 of who the top crust of the top priority 5-star type guys should be in the class of 2026. And outside of Andrews, it was Tyron Stokes and Jordan Mitchell Jr. were my next 2. And I had Arafan Diane in that top 5. The other name I believe I had in that group was Christian Collins, the 3-4 combo forward, who's ranked in, I think, 4th in 247's update. So that's kind of a look at that update. Again, multiple guys that are ranked in the top 12 that Arkansas has been recruiting, but some of the priority guys, including the commitment that Andrews represents, just on the outside looking in, that's interesting. I'm not going to go conspiracy theory, only that, can we have nice things? We know we have something nice. We know he's a 5-star, but we need the folks that actually put this stuff out there to go ahead and recognize that and put their stamp of approval on it. It's not going to matter at the end of the day. This guy, we all believe JJ's going to end up being a McDonald's All-American, but it does matter a little bit. I mean, give the guy the label that he deserves. Come on now. You're not giving it to him. He's earned it. All right, really quickly transitioning. We got 2 Pro Hogs tonight that are on the brink of winning an NBA Finals championship. Isaiah Joe, Jalen Williams, they have been a main part of Oklahoma City on a juggernaut kind of season where they had the best record in the NBA, set all kinds of standards along the way. One of only 7 teams to win 68 games or more in a regular season. The best record in the NBA, but a lot of other standards to get to where they are now. And at different times in these NBA playoffs, both of these guys have been plugged in and a key part of that second unit rotation. In the previous game, Oklahoma City winning at home against Indiana Pacers, the Thunder have overcome a 1-2 series deficit to win the last 2 games. They're up 3-2. They can close it tonight in Indianapolis and secure a 4-2 series win. If not, Game 7 will be back in Oklahoma City over the weekend. But, history is on several fronts here for Pro Hogs. Joe and Jalen, by the way, in game 5 did not play. That was the first game in these playoffs. Isaiah Joe had played in each of the previous 20 games in the playoffs. He did not come off the bench in the last game, nor did Jalen Williams, who's been used very sparingly, even more so in these finals. But both of these guys have contributed heavily to where Oklahoma City is now with this opportunity. And so if they do clinch this, whether it's tonight or game 7, you're going to have 2 Pro Hogs with NBA rings, and it brings to total 5 ring winners in the NBA Finals in the last 5 years. Bobby Portis in Milwaukee in the 2020-21 season as their 6th man. Moses Moody as a rookie the year later. He was in the 2-deep rotation in the Western Conference Finals series win over the Dallas Mavericks as a rookie. Played just sparingly in the finals, but he's part of that team. He helped them get where they were, even as a rookie. No, he wasn't one of their main guys, but he helped win a ring. And then 2 years later, which was last season, you had Boston and Jordan Walsh, who was on the 15-man active roster, and gets he may have even dipped a toe into a finals game at the end of one. He was certainly not part of the 2-deep rotation, but so what? He got a ring and competing, and that was against Dallas Mavericks and Dan Gafford, who was a regular in that starting lineup for that series. So Gafford didn't get a ring, but he made it to the finals. So just another Pro Hog. And so by my count, that was 4 Pro Hogs in the finals in 4 straight years. Well, now that number goes to 6 with Joe and Williams, and now they can become the 4th and 5th Pro Hogs in the last 5 years to actually win a ring. That's significant. I'm going to tell you why. Because by my math, prior to the last 5 years, you have to go all the way back to the previous era of basketball, the end of the 80s, early 90s, through the 90s, and then the early 2000s. And you had 4 Razorbacks previously, spanning about 15 years that had won rings. Scott Hastings with the Detroit Pistons, and I believe that was either 89, 90, 90, 91, somewhere in there. I think I forget the year, but Scott Hastings was one, former Hog, Pro Hog. Then Darrell Walker and Joe Klein in different seasons with the Chicago Bulls and that glorious run by Michael Jordan, winning 6 titles and the 6 championship series NBA finals that he appeared in, obviously 6 finals MVPs and 6 trophies, no game 7s. He's the GOAT, hands down, Michael Jordan, but Darrell Walker and Joe Klein got in on that fun. Joe Klein was on the team that won the last of those titles, and you saw him, featured multiple times in the Last Dance documentary on Netflix, if you've seen that. So that's 3: Hastings, Darrell Walker, Joe Klein. And then Corliss Williamson was the 6th man for the Detroit Pistons that beat Shaq and Kobe Lakers after their three-peat, beat them in 5 games in the 2003-2004 NBA Finals. Detroit, again, so you had Hastings bookending with Corliss Williamson, both playing for Detroit. Hastings, about 15 years prior to that, with the Bad Boy Pistons. Corliss later on. And then you had Walker and Klein, both with Chicago on 2 different teams, not playing together, but both playing with Michael Jordan. So that's really been the history. 4 guys, unless I'm out on someone else and just forgotten or left it off the table. But to have a chance now to have, again, you've got your 5th and 6th Pro Hog in the last 5 years to play in the finals, and you're about to add your 4th, likely add your 4th and 5th in the last 5 years to win a ring. So you in that little cluster of time, you've actually exceeded what the program had done historically, and how long it took just to have 4 do it, and now you're about to get again 5 in the last 5 years, which would bring the total to 9 all time. So I think that's interesting. Obviously, I'm going to do a follow-up article and probably talk about it on one of these segments. Once the NBA season's fully over, I'm going to do my Pro Hog Player of the Year in the NBA this past season, and kind of put stats in like I always do for all the Pro Hogs, what they did, what they accomplished, and what it looked like in this last season. Because basketball in the 23-24 season technically isn't over until these finals end. It was for college basketball back in April. We were already talking about 25-26, and we just talked yesterday, and I had a segment, go check that out if you haven't already, going through all 18 games of the Razorbacks SEC slate next season. We're obviously still talking roster and other things looking ahead as we've learned more about the non-conference schedule as well, which looks crazy good. We've been talking about that as well. But 23-24 officially ends as soon as these finals end. And we're obviously rooting for the Pro Hogs to get those rings. All right, 30 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. If something important breaks where we just have to come back in today, I'll probably be doing it remotely from my car because this is my travel day and won't be back till this evening. As we say goodbye, we say it with sadness. The Diamond Hogs blew a great opportunity to force another game against LSU later, would have been later today, with the winner then moving on to the best of 3 championship series. We know what happened. Arkansas loses 6-5. I had my first ever game story for HogvilleNET for the Diamond Hogs yesterday. And so that was a tough one to write. When we know what played out, I'm not going to go through all the details. But another College World Series and another maybe coulda, woulda, shoulda type of situation. Those happen. This was a great team, a fun team to watch. And now you just obviously try to regroup and figure it out once again next year. All right, signing off. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't already. I'm Kevin McPherson. This was HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Please take care of yourselves. We appreciate you being here. Until next time, see you soon.